The woodshop always smelled of cedar and varnish, but lately it had felt more like a grave. Henry moved quietly between the half-finished shelves and scattered tools, his eyes hollow with a kind of quiet ache that never seemed to fade. It had been 3 months since Claire passed, his wife, his partner, and the gentlest soul he had ever known. She'd spent her life in a wheelchair, legs paralyzed since childhood, but her heart had been full of movement, full of love. And now it was just Henry and his daughter, Ella, in a house that felt too big and too silent. He saw the way Ella stared out the window, not really seeing, and he knew grief like that needed more than time. So on a gray morning in late autumn, Henry took Ella's hand and said, "Let's go find just someone to talk to, Mama." They drove in silence toward the animal shelter. The shelter was quiet, the kind of quiet that settled into your bones. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as Henry and Ella stepped inside. A young woman behind the desk greeted them with a practiced smile, but Ella barely noticed. Her eyes scanned the rows of kennels, each one home to a barking, wagging blur of fur and need. "Take your time," the woman said kindly, but Ella didn't respond. She walked slowly past the cages, ignoring the bouncing puppies and excited whines. Then she stopped. At the end of the hallway, in the darkest kennel, sat a large German shepherd. His fur was dull, one eye clouded white, and a deep scar ran across his muzzle. His name tag simply read Bruno. "Why is he back here?" Ella asked softly. The woman hesitated. "He's not popular. He's old, half-blind, doesn't like to be touched." Ella crouched down in front of the kennel. Bruno didn't move. He didn't bark or growl, he just watched her. "I want this one," she said. Henry blinked. "Sweetheart, are you sure? There are others." "He reminds me of Mom." Her voice didn't waver. "Everyone looked past her because of the chair. But she saw me, and I think he will too." The shelter worker looked at Henry, unsure. "She's not changing her mind," he said quietly. Bruno didn't react as they filled out the paperwork. He didn't wag his tail or lick Ella's hand, but as they opened the door to leave, he rose slowly and followed. No leash, no command, just something silent between them that needed no words. Bruno didn't explore the house when they got home. He didn't sniff around or wag his tail. Instead, he moved slowly through the hallway and laid down beneath the living room window, where the light came in soft and golden. That's where he stayed. Ella didn't force him. She simply sat on the floor nearby and waited. It didn't happen right away. For days, Ella sat in silence across from Bruno, her lips pressed tight, fists clenched in her lap. She felt adrift in a world that no longer made sense. The loss of her mother had left a void that nothing seemed to fill. But then, there was something. The way Bruno's unwavering gaze mirrored the comforting presence her mother once provided, offering silent support through her tears. The way he tilted his head when she whispered to herself, just like her mom used to. The way his scar ran across his muzzle, just like the surgical scar on her mother's neck. It was strange, but in those details Ella found echoes, not a replacement for her mother, but reminders. Threads connecting her grief to something still here. And that made it easier to speak, not to people, but to Bruno. So one evening she began to talk. She told him about her mom, about the songs she used to sing, the way she made pancakes shaped like stars, how she'd braid Ella's hair even when her hands trembled. Bruno didn't respond, not with a bark, not even a twitch of his tail. But his good eye followed Ella's every movement, and that was enough. Day after day, Ella returned to that spot. She talked while doing homework, while sketching, while brushing her doll's hair, and always Bruno listened. Sometimes she'd cry, especially when she talked about the hospital, the wheelchair, the quiet after the last goodbye. And Bruno, old and tired, would lift his head just enough to rest it on her knee. That small gesture became everything. Henry watched from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel, unsure whether his heart was breaking or healing. In Bruno, Ella had found something sacred, not a replacement, never that, but something gentle, something still, something that didn't try to fix the silence, but simply stayed inside it with her. It had only been a week, but already Ella had stopped staring out the window. Now she sat beside it, telling stories. And for the first time since Claire passed, the house didn't feel so empty anymore. In the days that followed, something shifted in Bruno too. He no longer stayed by the window all day. He began to wander the house, poking his head into Henry's workshop, curling up beside Ella's bed at night. His tail, once still and stiff, began to thump softly whenever Ella walked into the room. And Ella, she had started humming again, sometimes even laughing. Small surprise sounds that escaped without warning. Bruno would nudge her hand with his nose then, as if to say, "There you are." The grief didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. And in that little house filled with sawdust, sunlight, and second chances, both of them began to feel a little less broken. It started with a walk. Henry had suggested they get some fresh air. Bruno needed to move his legs, and Ella, well, she hadn't been outside much since the funeral. The park wasn't far. Trees stood bare against the sky, their branches like open hands. Leaves scattered across the path as Ella walked slowly, Bruno trotting beside her, his pace gentle to match hers. That's when she saw him, a boy, maybe her age, sitting on a bench near the duck pond. He wore oversized headphones and clutched a fidget toy tightly in both hands. His eyes stared straight ahead, unblinking. Ella slowed. Bruno stopped too, sensing her change. She looked at the bum, then at Bruno. The old dog was calm still, his good eye watching the boy with quiet curiosity. Ella didn't say a word. She simply walked closer and sat on the grass, leaving space between them. Bruno lay beside her. The boy glanced at the dog just for a second, then looked away. The next day they came again, and the next. Each time the boy, Liam as she later learned, was there. Each time Bruno would lie a little closer. By the fourth visit, Liam reached out. Not much, just a tentative hand resting near Bruno's paw. Bruno didn't move, but his tail made one slow, heavy thump against the ground. Ella didn't speak. She just smiled and let the silence stretch between them like a warm blanket. She didn't know Liam's story yet, but she knew what it meant to feel alone. And somehow they were building something new, wordless, but real, right there in the hush of falling leaves and soft dog breath. It happened slowly, like most important things do. Liam never said a word, not to Ella, not to Bruno, not to anyone. His parents had tried everything, therapy, medication, special programs, but nothing had worked. Until Bruno. Every afternoon, Ella and Bruno returned to the same spot in the park. Liam was always there, sitting alone, his headphones guarding his silence. At first, Bruno simply lay nearby, calm, still, present. Then one day, Liam brought a cracker, broke it in half, and placed one piece on the bench beside him. The other he held out to Bruno. Bruno approached slowly, tail low, eyes kind. He took the offering gently, then sat beside Liam, their shoulders just barely touching. Bruno wasn't like the other dogs Liam had met in therapy programs. He didn't bark for attention or push for pets. He waited. There was something about Bruno that felt old, not just in age, but in presence. He didn't need words or gestures. He simply knew. Liam couldn't understand him. Not in the way Ella did. She became the translator. "Bruno doesn't need you to talk," she said once gently. "He just needs you to sit with him. That's how he talks." And Liam did. Not every day, not easily, but more and more he began to understand the silence Bruno offered. Not as emptiness, but as comfort. And slowly he stepped into that silence with him. The next day, Liam reached out and stroked Bruno's ear, tentative, trembling. Bruno leaned in and Liam smiled. Not wide, not loud, but real. Ella blinked back sudden tears. The day after that, Liam whispered something so soft Ella barely heard it. But Bruno heard. His ears twitched and Liam said it again. Dog. Just one word, but it echoed like a miracle. Liam's mother came running, tears already in her eyes. She knelt beside her son, sobbing into his shoulder. Ella stepped back, letting the moment belong to them. Bruno stayed still, head resting against Liam's knee. And for the first time, Liam didn't flinch at the touch. In the silence that followed, something had shifted, not just in Liam, but in everyone watching. One word and a dog who waited long enough to hear it. Ella had always thought of Bruno as hers. He was the gift her father gave her when the world felt like it had taken everything else. He was comfort, memory, and silence that understood. But something shifted the day Liam spoke. Ella saw it in Bruno's eyes. Not pride, not exactly, but presence, like he knew he had done something important. From that moment on, Ella began to see things differently. When she looked at Liam, she didn't just see a quiet boy with noise-canceling headphones. She saw someone trying every day to reach out from behind the glass wall that life had put between him and the world. And somehow she and Bruno had helped crack it. It wasn't grand, it wasn't a miracle, but it was something steady, something that stayed. Henry noticed too. One evening he found Ella sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook open, her pencil moving slowly across the page. "What are you working on?" he asked. Looked up. Her voice was quiet but sure. "I think I want to help kids like Liam," she said. "I think Bruno helped me see that." Henry smiled and sat beside her. "Then maybe that's why he came into our lives," he said. "Not just for you, but for what comes after." Ella looked at Bruno, who lay curled near the stove, his breathing deep and even. He didn't stir, but his presence filled the room like warmth. And for the first time, Ella felt something new bloom inside her. Not just healing, but purpose. The leaves changed, the air grew colder, and still they came. Every afternoon, like clockwork, Ella, Bruno, and Liam would find their way to the same park bench. It had become ritual. Ella would bring a sketch pad, Liam would bring his fidget toys. Bruno brought his calm. Some days they sat in silence. Some days they spoke. Well, Ella did. Liam would nod or gesture, sometimes even whisper a word or two. And Bruno, he remained the center of it all. As winter arrived, they layered up. Scarves, gloves, thermoses of cocoa. Liam began smiling more. He'd meet Ella's eyes now, sometimes even reach for her hand when he was overwhelmed. Ella had grown too. Her voice had softened, but her confidence deepened. She was no longer just a girl who had lost her mother. She was a friend, a guide, a bridge. Henry watched them from his workbench by the window, often pausing mid-sandpaper stroke just to take in the sight. "You three look like a painting," he said once. "Something worth remembering." Bruno had started to slow down. He still came along, still watched over Liam with the same unwavering gaze, but his steps were stiffer now. His rest lasted longer. Ella noticed. She didn't say anything, but she started drawing more pictures of Bruno, curled up, watching, waiting, and as spring whispered its way back into the world, she knew something was shifting again. Time was moving, and they were all moving with it. It was a quiet morning in late spring. Sunlight poured through the windows of their home, casting golden pools across the floor. Bruno lay in his usual spot near the stove, his breath slow and shallow. Ella knew. She had known for weeks. The way he struggled to stand, how his steps wobbled, the deep sighs that escaped him more often. Henry had called the vet. They wouldn't let him suffer. Not Bruno. That morning, Ella sat on the floor beside him, her back against the cabinets. She held his paw gently, tracing the old scars with her thumb. "Remember the park?" she whispered. And Liam's first word? Bruno's ear twitched, barely. "I wasn't ready to say goodbye to Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "But this time, I think I understand." Henry sat behind her, one hand resting on her shoulder, the other stroking Bruno's head. Liam and his mother came too. The boy walked straight to Bruno and knelt beside him without hesitation. He placed a drawing on the floor. Bruno, lying in the sun, surrounded by children. It was perfect. Ella leaned down, pressing her forehead to Bruno's. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. "You gave me everything." Bruno let out a breath that sounded almost like a sigh of peace. The vet spoke softly, moved gently. Ella didn't let go, not until the very last breath left his body, slow and quiet like a leaf falling in the wind. And when it did, she didn't scream. She didn't run. She stayed. Bruno had taught her that, how to stay. She stayed until the sun shifted and the light no longer reached the stove. Then she stood. She folded the blanket Bruno had loved and placed it on the shelf by the window. She took Liam's hand and they walked outside together. Years passed, Ella grew. She finished school, studied psychology, and specialized in child development. When asked why, she always said the same thing. "A dog taught me how to listen." Now she worked in a quiet little therapy center just outside the city. The waiting room smelled faintly of crayons and coffee. The walls were lined with drawings, many of them from Liam, who still visited sometimes, now a teenager with a soft voice and steady hands. On her desk sat a framed sketch, Bruno in the sunlight, Liam by his side, drawn by a boy who once spoke only to a dog. Ella kept a worn leash in the top drawer. She never used it. She just liked knowing it was there. Outside the center, children played in the garden. Some ran, some rocked back and forth. Some didn't speak at all, but Ella knew how to wait. She didn't push, she didn't hurry. She sat and she listened. Sometimes she'd hum softly the way her mother once did. And every now and then, a child would reach out, tentative, uncertain, and take her hand. And that was enough, because she remembered. She remembered what it meant to be broken, to be quiet, to be lost. And she remembered what it meant to be found by a dog with one good eye, a slow tail, and a heart big enough to hold all her pain. What remained wasn't just memory, it was love in motion. And Ella carried it forward, one child, one story, one quiet afternoon at a time. It was a rainy afternoon when she saw him, a boy, maybe 7, standing alone by the window of the center's waiting room. His jacket was soaked, his fist clenched. Ella knelt beside him. "Rain's heavy today," she said softly. The boy didn't reply, but his eyes flicked toward the leash hanging by the door, an old, faded one. Ella followed his gaze and smiled. "That used to belong to someone very special," she whispered. Still no words, but the boy's hands slowly reached out, brushing the leash with tentative fingers. Ella didn't push, she simply waited. Later that day, she found a sketch on the art table. Crayon lines, shaky but bold. A dog with one eye. Ella stood still for a long moment, her hand pressed to her chest. She didn't cry. She didn't need to, because Bruno was still here, in every quiet corner, in every gentle moment of trust, in every child who dared to reach out. Love, she had learned, doesn't vanish. It lingers. It circles back. It shows up in the unlikeliest places. In a boy with shaking hands, in a crayon sketch, in the memory of a dog who stayed. And Ella, with her heart wide open, whispered, "I see you, old friend." Then she turned back to the boy and smiled.